Newfoundland does not behave like the rest of Canada. Geographically, historically, geologically, it operates by different rules. It joined Confederation in 1949, the last province to do so, and sometimes it feels like the island is still deciding whether it made the right call. The rock itself is ancient beyond comprehension. The coastline defies measurement. The weather is a separate personality. And there are corners of this province where the landscape produces effects so strange, so specific, and so completely unreported that most Canadians have no idea they exist. 10 entries. Pay attention. Newfoundland has its own time zone, and it exists nowhere else on Earth. Most people know Newfoundland Standard Time is unusual. What they don't fully absorb is just how unusual. Newfoundland sits at UTC minus 3 hours and 30 minutes, not -3, not -4, -3.5. It is one of only 3 places in the world that operates on a half-hour offset from its nearest neighbors, the others being India and Iran. This is not a rounding error or a colonial quirk that never got corrected. When the rest of Atlantic Canada says 6 p.m., Newfoundland says 6:30 p.m. Every broadcast, every flight schedule, every phone call from the mainland. Newfoundland clocks read differently from every other clock in the Western Hemisphere, and the province has fought to keep it that way through multiple Confederation debates. The half-hour exists because it does, because it always did, and because Newfoundland sees no compelling reason to change it. The island sits on a piece of Africa. This requires some setup, but it is worth it. The Appalachian Mountains run from Alabama to the northeastern United States. Then they stop, or appear to. But geologically, they continue. Across the Atlantic Ocean, into Morocco and the Atlas Mountains of northwestern Africa. The Appalachian Caledonian mountain chain is a single continuous geological structure that predates the opening of the Atlantic Ocean. When Pangaea broke apart roughly 200 million years ago, the chain was split down the middle. The western half stayed with North America. The eastern half ended up in Europe and Africa. The long-range mountains running down the western spine of Newfoundland are the same mountain chain. The same rocks, the same folding events, the same age as mountains currently sitting in Morocco. Newfoundland is not just Canadian. Parts of it are, geologically, African. There is a coastline so jagged it cannot be accurately measured. Newfoundland's total coastline is officially listed at approximately 29,000 kilometers. That number is essentially meaningless. Coastline length is a fractal problem. The more precisely you measure it, the longer it gets. Because every bay contains smaller bays, every inlet contains smaller inlets, and every rock has a perimeter. Newfoundland's coastline, with its thousands of fjords, coves, peninsulas, and offshore islands, is among the most geometrically complex in the world. The 29,000-kilometer figure uses a measurement interval that smooths out anything smaller than a certain scale. Measure it more precisely, and the number grows. Icebergs float past here every single spring, calved from glaciers in Greenland. Between April and July, icebergs drift down the Labrador Current past the northeastern tip of Newfoundland in numbers that stagger first-time visitors. These are not small ice formations. These are multi-story structures, some the size of cathedrals, some the size of city blocks, calved from glaciers in Greenland and carried south by ocean current on a journey that takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years. Iceberg Alley, the stretch of water off the northeast coast near St. Anthony and Twillingate, hosts more viewable icebergs per season than anywhere else on Earth outside the polar regions. In a strong iceberg year, hundreds of them make it far enough south to be seen from shore. The Titanic struck one of these in 1912, approximately 600 kilometers southeast of Newfoundland. The water that Iceberg was made from fell as snow in Greenland somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000 years ago during the last ice age. Gross Mourn contains rocks from the Earth's mantle that have no business being on the surface. The tablelands in Gross Mourn National Park look like Mars. Specifically, they look like the surface photographs taken by early Mars landers, flat, rust-colored, almost completely devoid of vegetation. There is a reason for this. The tablelands are composed of peridotite, a rock type that normally exists 30 to 60 kilometers beneath the Earth's surface in the upper mantle. It was thrust onto the surface during a tectonic collision approximately 480 million years ago, and it has sat there ever since in one of the most geologically improbable exposures on Earth. Peridotite is toxic to most plant life. It contains high concentrations of heavy metals and lacks the nutrients plants need. Almost nothing grows on it. The barren orange plateau that results is so scientifically significant that Gross Mourn was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site specifically for providing evidence that confirmed the theory of plate tectonics. The rocks that proved continental drift are sitting in western Newfoundland, visitable by anyone with a 2-hour drive from Deer Lake. The province contains a fjord deeper than most of the Atlantic Ocean. Western Brook Pond in Gross Mourn is not a pond. The name is a Newfoundland usage where pond means any inland body of water regardless of size, an idiosyncrasy that has confused visitors for centuries. Western Brook Pond is a fjord, landlocked when glacial rebound lifted the land and cut it off from the sea roughly 9,000 years ago. Its walls rise 670 meters straight from the water. Its depth reaches 165 meters. It is one of the deepest landlocked fjords in the world, surrounded by waterfalls that drop hundreds of meters in single unbroken columns. Because it is entirely cut off from the ocean, its water is exceptionally pure. Some of the cleanest fresh water on Earth, sitting in a geological formation that looks like it was lifted from Norway and placed intact on a Canadian island. The Atlantic Ocean, off Newfoundland's Grand Banks, is often shallower. Cape St. Mary's is where gannets breed in numbers that overwhelm the senses. There are seabird colonies on the Avalon Peninsula's Cape St. Mary's containing over 24,000 northern gannets nesting on a single sea stack called Bird Rock, separated from the mainland by a narrow chasm. You can walk to the edge and stand approximately 10 meters from the rock. The noise is total. The smell is total. The sheer biological density, every surface of that rock packed with meter-tall white birds, eggs, chicks, and the constant aerial traffic of thousands of adults arriving and departing is one of the most visually overwhelming wildlife spectacles in North America. What makes the geography significant is proximity. Most gannet colonies are accessible only by boat, from a distance. Cape St. Mary's is the only place in North America where a major gannet colony can be approached on foot to within shouting distance. You stand on the edge of a headland and look at tens of thousands of seabirds at eye level. No boat, no binoculars required. Signal Hill in St. John's is where the wireless age began. In December 1901, Guglielmo Marconi stood on Signal Hill, a rocky promontory overlooking the Narrows entrance to St. John's Harbor, and received the first transatlantic wireless signal ever transmitted. The signal had been sent from Cornwall, England, approximately 400 kilometers away. Marconi chose Signal Hill for the same reason the British military had fortified it for centuries. It is an extraordinary geographic position, elevated directly above the Atlantic, with nothing between it and Europe but open ocean. The geography that made it strategically important to colonial powers made it scientifically ideal for the experiment that changed global communication permanently. The Cabot Tower still stands on Signal Hill. You can drive to it in 15 minutes from downtown St. John's. From that same spot where wireless transmission began, on a clear day, you can see icebergs drifting south through the very ocean the signal crossed. The Grand Banks is one of the most geologically peculiar shallow seas on Earth. The continental shelf off Newfoundland extends hundreds of kilometers into the Atlantic before dropping to abyssal depths. The Grand Banks, the broad, shallow plateau sitting atop that shelf, reaches depths of only 25 to 100 meters across an area roughly the size of Newfoundland itself. This shallowness, combined with the collision of the cold Labrador Current and the warm Gulf Stream directly above it, creates upwelling conditions that drove one of the most productive fisheries in human history. Cod existed there in quantities that early European explorers described as so dense you could lower a basket and raise it full. That fishery was effectively destroyed in decades. The federal government declared a moratorium on northern cod in 1992. It was the largest industrial layoff in Canadian history. 40,000 people out of work in a single announcement. The cod have not fully recovered. The banks are still there, still shallow, still productive in modified form, still generating fog so thick that shipping lanes require year-round navigational warnings. The geography that drew Europeans to this continent for 500 years is sitting largely empty, 300 kilometers off the Newfoundland coast, waiting. Newfoundland was the first part of North America that most of the world found and then promptly forgot about. The Norse were at Lalonsa, Ox Meadows, on the northern tip of the Great Northern Peninsula approximately 1,000 years ago. The archaeological site is unambiguous: turf longhouses, Norse construction techniques, iron rivets of Scandinavian type, a bronze cloak pin from the Viking period. They were there. They built structures. They stayed for a period, then they left, and European awareness of the continent evaporated for roughly 500 years until John Cabot arrived in 1497. L'Anse Meadows is the only confirmed Norse site in North America outside Greenland. It is also in winter one of the most remote and wind-scoured places on the continent, a flat treeless headland on the absolute northeastern tip of an island that is already the northeastern edge of North America. Standing there in November, looking at the reconstructed longhouses, at the ocean, at the emptiness in every direction, the question is not why the Norse left. The question is how they found it at all.